I spent 2 years as a sous-chef at Noma. So when the accusations came out, I could choose one of two things. I could defend the place that I worked, or I could pretend I was never there. But I don't want to do either. What I want to do is just try to understand. Because here is what nobody wants to admit within this debate. That power structures are a thing, but they're also necessary for us to do the work that we have to do. A kitchen without power structure doesn't become more humane. It becomes more chaotic and more dangerous. This is my take on power structures and how to live with them, not without them. If you stick to the end of the video, I'm going to go through what would be the most responsible way to deal with a kitchen environment and what is the best way to approach a kitchen environment if you're new to the game. During the latest sort of revelations, or should we just say the Noma case regarding accusations about abuse at Noma, the world-famous restaurant, and René Redzepi, its head chef, a lot of things have come to play in a, I believe, a very unusual way for us in the restaurant industry, and I've been really trying to make sense out of it. If you have followed my Substack writing in this channel, you would be able to see how I at first try to make sense of the used practice of staging for free in a restaurant, as in being sort of interested in developing yourself and going to places to work for free, what that potentially can do for you, what the potential pitfalls can be, and so on. You can watch the video, or you can go read my writing about it on Substack. Then I have written about the brigade system that I did not make a video about, and have also prepared some writing about René Redzepi, because I myself have worked there as a sous chef in 2007 to 2009. So the reason why I want to touch on this is because there's many words. It's like we need to expand our vocabulary as chefs today, because it's not all béarnaise and emulsion and poaching and whatever that means. It's structural issues, it's power dynamics, it is systems of oppression, and so on. And I'm trying to make sense of these things, because the problem is that the discussion being so polarized, a lot of these words are weaponized to sound like if you question their legitimacy, then you're either in favor of abuse, or you are an oppressor, or right wing. So we're politicizing these things, where I think it's quite the opposite that we should do. We should try and consider and understand these words and these terms in ways that can empower everybody to have as much agency as possible, and to be able to navigate this world that is complex, no matter how you put it, in the best possible way, to your own and the benefit of others. Today in particular, I want to talk about power structures, because power structures is undeniably a reality, and it's undeniably something that comes into play when we are dealing with a kitchen at any level, but particularly at a very high level. And I think that has to do with how it connects to two different things. One, the responsibility that you have when you are in power. Two, the amount of pressure that it puts on people, and therefore the higher the responsibility. So when people talk about power structure and power dynamics, this is a philosophical tradition that goes far back, and The most known proponent of these ideas is Karl Marx, that argued that who owned the means of production would essentially be in power and therefore would be exploiting everybody else. Now, I have been criticized earlier on other social media platforms that I didn't understand what these power structures meant. And my response was to say that my critic was founding herself in Marx's theory, and that was ridiculized. And I just think that it's simply because people kind of miss the link, and it's fair enough. What we have to understand is that if we take a point of departure with Marx that had in mind the well-being of the working class, who works in the factory, does a job that has very little to contribute with in terms of human inspiration and human capability. So clearly, if you are just a cog in the system and you are a part of producing means, and all the benefits of owning the means are just so much more valuable than the work that you do and the pay that you get, for sure, someone needs to consider that as in a power structure that gets very rigid and very difficult to break out of. Okay, this is left-wing politics towards socialism and communism that are very, very common and very appealing, including to myself. I myself have since youth been extremely left-wing with many of these topics because I have sympathy for this problem. How do you take care of the working class people? So then as we go further into history between the 60s and 70s, you have a French philosophical evolution or influence that starts looking at power structures way beyond the resources and the means of production. What they talk about is more that power is something embedded in everything. It's in culture, it's in the way we talk to each other, it has to do with everything about you and your identity. These are the post-structuralist, post-modernist, saying that everything that we take for granted, we cannot take for granted. Okay, good point. Why? Well, everything being in a power structure, history is written by who won, okay? The reason why we believe some things more than others is because we're told so by who is in power. Okay, interesting. Could make sense, and it's an appealing thought. Now that the discussion moves away from the means of production and becomes more cultural, then the identity that, or the sort of the groups, the in-groups and out-groups that were discussed before, being working class and the owning class, was then changed into being more about identities. So oppression being cultural, it's about who is where, and no matter where you are in some sort of power struggle against other people. And this has become a lens through which we can look at the world and essentially see everybody struggling for power. It's a useful way of looking at things, but it's also something that proposes a very bleak way of looking at life. Now, if we go into the kitchen and we say, well, is there a power structure in the kitchen? Well, most certainly so. There is a power structure because there has to be a power structure. The idea that you can solve tasks without organizing yourself in a way that is efficient, fast, and purposeful and useful just doesn't make any sense. And what that does, as soon as you organize anything, any group of people, you will necessarily start creating some sort of hierarchy. Because who would be the most obvious person to make the most difficult decisions and make the tough calls in a moment of high pressure where you don't have much time to discuss it? Well, intuitively, one would say that the one with the most experience and the highest level of leadership and the highest level of responsibility and the highest level, therefore, of power would be the one that has to make the calls. So we build a hierarchy where the head chef or sous-chef is in charge. This is a power structure. Where I differ from a lot of the critics of these discussions about kitchen environment is that I don't see it as inherently bad. I see it as a product of a way of organizing yourself that is extremely efficient and extremely necessary in situations where pressure is high, responsibility are high, and stakes are high. So when the system or the hierarchy or the power structure creates abusive behavior, what can we do about it? This is a completely legitimate question, and I think it's very important to address it, and it's very important to try and make sense of it. Now, a lot of the loud voices in this discussion towards, particularly amongst the critics of Noma and Redzepi and so on, and I would say more than anything, the critics of who was not criticizing Noma and Redzepi, they claim that the system must be brought down, that the system must be changed because the system is corrupt and the system creates abuse. So because it creates abuse, it must be abolished. I think that this is a claim that has very little understanding of the reality that is cooking in a kitchen. I'm not even high level, just the kitchen. The brigade system, as I wrote about in another Substack post, has become the most efficient way of organizing a restaurant, and it is therefore the most used and obvious power structure that we have to try and make sense of in the restaurant industry and in cooking in general. But when we talk about abusive behavior, what I make the case for in my writing is that the less structure, the more abusive behavior. I am a proponent of more structure to create less chaos, because this idea that abusive behavior is embedded in any kind of power structure is a very political and ideological founded idea. It's not based on reality. What I have found by far is that while you might have some people that have moved up the ladder and put themselves in a position of power or responsibility, but have done so by being slightly dodgy. You know, I have seen those people. I have been a sous chef in a restaurant where the person that was supposed to take on my position, I found him to be not adapt for the position. As I quit and I put in my notice, I told the head chef that he had proposed to say, let's call him Doug. He said, Doug will take on your position. What would you think about that? I said, that's a really bad idea. Why? Because I saw him as being selfish and the kind of guy that is very good as sucking up to the head chef, but acted very differently when the head chef was not around. So he took advantage of the power structure, and when he was put in position of power, I know for a fact that he used that situation to make his life easier and the life of everybody else much worse. Not as in an abusive way, but in an untrustworthy way. In a way that he didn't provide the support and the help towards the younger members of the team, and rather try to create a situation for himself where he would look good towards the head chef, and he would dart out of there whenever there would be any problems, and he would just simply throw people under the bus. So, is this making the case that this system should be then abolished? Because what would then be the alternative? That there's a bad actor in a system is not proof that the system doesn't work. It's a proof, and an obvious proof, that the system is not perfect, like there is no system. When people talk about oppressive power structures, what they have to remember that the more oppressive it is, the more perfect it is. What do I mean? I mean, if there's no room for human failures, it is oppressive. Because then no one can, yes, take advantage of it, but also no one can thrive because it's too much. So when people use the idea of power structures and Karl Marx and essentially advocating for totalitarian regimes to some extent to fix a system that is inherently based on a meritocracy, which means that you are where you deserve to be, makes very little sense to me. Now, if we think what are the benefits of the power structure that are in the kitchen, we could think about where do we find other power structures? Well, a family is a power structure. Well, your children do not have the same amount of power and responsibility than the parents. That doesn't make them abuse the kids. That is creates a condition where you must live up to the responsibility you have towards your children and take responsibility for them. I think that same approach is what is necessary to create a good working environment within a kitchen or restaurant establishment. So the way you confront the system is to make sure that you reward who is taking responsibility for themselves and others, and who is able and capable of speaking the truth. Now, this is the main point of this. If you can speak the truth and you can say, this I believe in, this I do not believe in, this I think will work, this I think won't work, the more you move up the responsibility ladder, the more you will have an effect on this power structure, and the more you will work towards making it a true meritocracy, because the truth is the most essential part of the meritocracy. The question remains, how do you navigate through a power structure in the best possible way, at the top and at the bottom? I believe that at the bottom, what you must understand is that you will benefit far more from trying to acquire a level of agency and understanding your position and understand the power structure and understand how it has distributed power with responsibility. With that I mean that for many, what many experience is a kitchen of chaos, and a working environment of chaos is absolutely the worst thinkable place you can be, because it's very difficult to find purpose in chaos, right? This again makes the case for a power structure that is done with or sort of dealt with appropriately. For you to thrive within that system, you must understand that the fact that someone is there to tell you how to do things is not inherently bad. That is the best case scenario for you when you are young and starting out. You're at a low level and you want to be somewhere where people are not afraid to make the calls, not afraid to take responsibility for you and for your learning. Okay? If this tips into not taking care of your personal interest, and we need to talk about what your personal interest might be within the bottom of this system, which I believe you must have a much more humble approach to than I think is widely understood currently. Understand that you go into the kitchen to learn, and you must be capable of not taking offense for people and their lack of skills, and understand that in most kitchens, the people at the top are rarely experienced enough. Okay? What you need to find and make sure that you have is that you have managers around you or above you that are, one, interested in making you improve your skill set, two, capable of understanding how to make you improve and to help you solve the issues that you're confronted with, and three, a sort of sense of humanity that while understanding that you must be pressured to move forward and develop, you cannot be pressured to the point of breaking. That is completely senseless in any workplace or in any kitchen. No one needs to be broken down. This is a ridiculous claim, and I think it's a claim that comes from people that have very little understanding, or more than anything, honestly, probably have had the wrong mentors in life. Okay, no reason to break anybody down. What we want to do with people at the bottom is to offer them opportunity to build up. For you to acknowledge that opportunity, you must not create this idea that your managers are there to relieve you from any pressure, from all pressure. You must be able to thrive in pressure to be in this kind of environment. Pressure doesn't mean people are abusing you. Pressure means you're busy. You gotta get stuff done, okay? You have to get stuff done, and you have to be willing to try and do your best. It is stressful, it's difficult, you mostly fail, and you have to deal with failing too. And who is above you in this power structure needs to understand that for you to develop and be a valuable asset to the team, and for this particular manager, you must be able to fail and get through it and get better by it. Okay? At the bottom, what you want is a set of opportunities, and what you want to bring is an amount of will and wish to take on these opportunities. When we are at the top of this system, what we have to always try and defend is, first of all, the truth. I don't believe that you can have as your first priority the well-being of everybody, because the well-being of everybody is a personal issue. It is so incredibly difficult to make sense of people, their psychology, who they are, what they're going through, that to make managers, particularly young, rarely very experienced people in a kitchen or any other type of young environment at least, to make them responsible for people's well-being is misunderstanding things heavily and creating what I think is a huge problem, which is that you distort the position and the expectations towards each other. A manager is there to provide you with opportunity and to protect you from making mistakes that are crucial, but to support you when you make the mistakes that are a part of the game and that you can develop with. They're not there to make sure that you feel good all the time, because no one can do so, not even yourself. People go through difficult things and they are worth acknowledging, but you can't fix them. And the idea that a manager should fix your feelings, I think is completely wrong. Like, what do you expect from these people? There's a lot of discussion about people do not have the leadership skills required to be leading other people. Yes and no, because I honestly find that if you have mentors that are capable of showing you things and both show you the purpose that they have and to some extent ignite something in you, right? A wish to do better, to work for it, to improve on what you're doing. I think that's about how much you can expect from a sous-chef or chef de partie that's 24, right? All the human resource-based ideas of acknowledging feelings and things like that, I think it could be nice, it could be great, but I think we're demanding too much of people that already are not capable and not very experienced in what they can do. The point of the kitchen being a meritocracy and that being a good thing can face a lot of criticism. But here's my take on it. Meritocracy becomes criticized a lot as a structure that we establish our whole society on with good reason. Why? Because some people have a different time to access what it demands of you to be a part of it. Education, and so on. Like, we live in Denmark here. This is probably the best possible example of a mix between fairly socialist politics, but also meritocracy to some extent. We pay very high taxes, but you have access to opportunity, but you also have a safety net that can help you out if you're not lucky enough to have the capability, the skills, whatever, to make you play the game, so to say. So what I find interesting is that the restaurant industry is the best possible and thinkable place, world, planet for meritocracy. Because people have access to work in a kitchen or in a restaurant at all levels, at all times, all genders, all ethnical backgrounds, even like more diverse ethnical backgrounds in kitchens than anywhere else. You have the opportunity to work in a kitchen and work your way up. In my own case, it took me 10 years from being an apprentice to opening my own restaurant. I know that today, 10 years is a long time. Most people go from finishing an apprenticeship, a stage, or whatever it is, depending on what country you're in, and they will end up having a responsible head chef position or even being a part owner in a restaurant in a matter of not even 5 years. So you have access to the opportunities that the restaurant industry provides easily. I also have personally seen people working in the dishes and moving on to being a barista, a baker, a chef, and so on. And then from there on, letting go of maybe some education they were doing or whatever, and just focusing on the restaurant industry. I think that there's many, many, many good things to say about the restaurant industry as an engine for equality between classes, right? In relation to truth being the most important element of the meritocracy, is that I think that this responsibility is on who is at the top of the meritocracy. A simple story from my own life. I was 100% convinced that when I opened my first restaurant, Relæ, it was sort of an antithesis to the fine dining restaurant. And I made some calls in the beginning that were kind of like a little teenage like I wanted to be contrary in every way. I wanted it to be so much not fine dining that I decided that besides having small drawers where we would have the cutlery in the table that people would take out themselves, in those drawers I put in paper napkins, not cloth, paper napkins. It was fun to begin with. We received a Michelin star with paper napkins. At one point, a person started as a waiter sommelier, and it did not take him long to say, hey, the paper napkin doesn't make sense. Like, you're past it. It doesn't make sense. People eat food at a very high level, and the fact of using a cloth napkin is just, we need to go past this. And at first, I was a little taken aback, but what I admired was the courage. He had an idea, and he had the courage to challenge the truth, to challenge my truths. He came up to me and said, listen, and he was a waiter. He was nobody, and he did so. What the story ended up being was that we did change the paper napkins, because I admitted it, and he became my business partner in 3 years from there on, from that case. So when I think about the truth, is that you must, if you're at the bottom, put a lot of energy into trying to understand, are people interested in the truth? It doesn't mean that you're supposed to say anything. When you are at the very beginning, don't start telling people to change things. That's not my point. My point is, would a dynamic like this improve the place if I can bring about things humbly that could push things forward? Would this place be interested in doing it? This is a very important dynamic that I think is useful. Now, if you're working with a chef de partie and he tells you to do things and you think, I know better, shut up. Don't start by doing that. But if you find your moment and you have maybe built a little relation to this person, you then maybe could say, I was thinking, would it make sense to do it this way? And see the reaction. I think that the truth and challenging the truth is what can propel a community of people forward and make better things. So the main job lies on who's at the top to be able to be confronted with criticism of the ideas and take it in and try and use it to make things better for everybody. At the bottom, you must understand that the agency that you can achieve by having the courage to be who you are within this system, if it's a system that you appreciate and you want to be a part of, that is what makes you move forward. Working in kitchens is not easy. A power structure is there to help us survive it, because the level of pressure and the level of intensity is difficult, but to some of us, amazing. We like it. The power and responsibility, the distribution of the two, who takes charge and who makes sure that things are going in a certain way, is what makes these things bearable. It's also who has the main responsibility, who has the position of leadership, that has to some extent, deliver some level of vision, courage, or ideas that makes it feel like it's purposeful to go through these things, because it's difficult, right? But if you're looking towards wanting to change this to something that has very little structure, I'm afraid to say that it will suck and it will be much worse than what a system of well-established and well-applied power is. The meritocracy is something you can work your way into, and you can get to the top. And what I found with myself and people around me is that by far the majority have been working towards improving both their leadership skills and their work-life balance and so on throughout their entire career. And this is how change in this restaurant industry and in any other industry is made. People are calling on social media. People are calling for revolutions. Revolutions very rarely get you to where you think you're gonna go. The small, incremental improvement by people that love this industry is completely invisible in this discussion. And I think that this is my biggest This is my biggest worry. My biggest worry is that we don't appreciate who's doing the right things, who's rewarding the right behaviors, who is has the courage to apply themselves, to stick their neck out, to do things, do them better, and get people on board with them and do them. And we end up just yelling at people, which is essentially what we're supposedly trying to stop. I hope this was useful for you. It's useful for me to rant about things and yap about things that I am putting a lot of thought into. I will probably write most of this up for another Substack. But if you have questions, if you have legitimate interest in improving this restaurant industry, could you please consider me at your service? Write me an email, or even better, put me a comment in this video and ask me, how do I do that? What do you think of this? I have 25 years of experience. I don't have any restaurants, but I have a great love for this restaurant industry, and I wish to help whoever wants help. Feel free to contact me on whatever social media platform you like. And if not, please subscribe to this channel and look me up on Substack, where I do most of the writing. Thank you.